You're listening to the Bird's Eye View podcast with Kent Summers from azcentral.com and Mike Jurecki.
You're listening to the Bird's Eye View podcast. Kent Summers from the Arizona Republic, azcentral.com. I am Mike Jurecki, and hopefully within the next couple of weeks, I will tell you where I'm landing. Podcast number 51, Ken.
Yeah, it's significant. Probably our last one, maybe, for a month or so until training camp rolls up. The work here concluded Thursday with minicamp. Rookies are going to be here for another couple weeks working with some of the coaches, but the veterans are gone until probably, we should get a camp schedule, I would think, in the next week or so. But I think the Cardinals, from what I hear, in like July 20th, 21st, open camp in Glendale.
Yeah, normally teams can open up 15 days for your first preseason game. Of course, this year they're playing in the Hall of Fame game coming up on that Thursday in the early part of August. Usually rookies arrive a few days earlier, so give or take the July 20th, July 21st. And then the next thing you know, they'll have that first preseason game. Now, you mentioned the rookies are going to be here for the next couple of weeks. And Buda Baker, who obviously wasn't able to participate in a lot of the OTAs and the mandatory minicamp, he was here for rookie camp. He has signed his contract. Now, they can't work out with veterans here at the facility. I know Tyrann Mathieu earlier in the week mentioned on radio that he's going to get a chance to work with him.
Right.
Tyrann's going to stay here. He feels more comfortable being here versus more distractions. He also has his football camp down in Louisiana and Arizona. So, Bruce Arians, I asked him on Thursday, how many reps the rookies have gotten. And, of course, ever since he's been here, for our listeners not familiar with it, they have two football fields. And 45 guys are on one field, and that's usually third and fourth string. And then some guys graduate to the main field. And then, obviously, when you get to mandatory minicamp, because of the weather, they were inside the bubble. But about 400 to 450 reps. And I don't know if you can make the case in some other camps that rookies are getting that many reps before they had the training camp.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's a good way to do it, especially when you have a coaching staff the size the Cardinals do. When you have, 20-some coaches and plus maybe a couple of interns here, there's plenty of instruction going on. Okay. It's after the free agency. It's after the draft. We've seen a little bit of practice. We know what the concerns were going in. What do you see? What do you think was the biggest story starting in OTA, say May till now? Mid-June?
Well, first of all, just the whole idea that they decided to make a decision internally and with Carson Palmer that him getting rest. He didn't.
I agree 100%. Yeah,
I thought that was the biggest story, and just watching him throwing in the mandatory minicamp inside the bubble. I mean, his arm strength was there. He was throwing the ball down the field.
Yeah, Arian said on that Wednesday practice he was as good as he ever was, maybe better than he ever was on timing routes.
Yeah, and Carson's talked about how many throws he's made in the month of March and April, and that wasn't the case this year. Now he's going to invite some guys to California to do some throwing there. But you can see the different arm strength, and obviously once you don't have the wear and tear. And I thought, last year we kind of thought, all right, he's not practicing on Wednesdays. How good can that be? I think his numbers showed in the second half of the season that the arm strength was there. He was getting better protection. Teams were taking away the deep ball in the first half of the season. They had some drops. John Brown wasn't the same player. Michael Floyd wasn't the same player.
Yeah, Arians made that pretty clear. He was asked on the Wednesday of minicamp, why Carson Palmer's numbers and productivity on long balls were down, and he said John Brown couldn't run and Michael Floyd dropped at least 5.
Yeah, and that was pretty
Couldn't
obvious.
argue. Yeah.
No, so I
don't know that was the only reason, because you go back, talking about his arm strength, he underthrew a number of those balls early in the season, and there was a reason they started giving him Wednesdays off.
Yeah, and Tom Brady does the same thing, and I know these guys like the preparation, they like to be out there, but when you throw X amount of balls in off season and you still have training camp for the timing stuff, I really think it stood out. I think that was the great plan, and we'll see moving forward how he plays in the first half.
I think it's a thing that a lot of football players go through, and maybe quarterbacks especially, that you grow up in a sport where repetitions are everything. Give me the snaps in practice. I need to see things, and you get used to that. But you hit a certain age, and all of a sudden that takes a toll on the body throwing that many times. And I think Carson Palmer had to be convinced last year
Yeah.
that he couldn't do that away from him.
And it's not like he wasn't on the practice field. He participated, I want to say, in the last 3 OTAs and then obviously the 3 days of mandatory minicamp. But he also talked about footwork and some of his mechanics, and you would think a guy that's been in the league this long, you tweak a little bit of things. But he said it was a work in progress, and that's something he's going to continue to work on.
Yeah, you definitely, I think it's true in any profession, you don't want to take things for granted, because that's how it ends really quickly for you and the performance falls off. The whole quarterback position, I mean, it's always interesting on every team every year, most important position, but this group was interesting to me this spring and will be through the summer. They signed Blaine Gabbert. They eventually cut Zach Dysert. It sure looks like they're headed toward Palmer starting, Drew Stanton again as the number 2. Arians has made that clear. And a veteran with 6 years' experience, Blaine Gabbert, as the number 3.
Yeah, and they've been impressed the way he's picked up the system. I mean, you look at his overall record, 9-31, being a high draft pick. He clearly didn't have the talent in Jacksonville or San Francisco, at least at the skill position, like they do on the Cardinals. Now, the fact is that they probably don't want to run into the same scenario a few years ago when they had to go into a playoff game on the road. Nothing against Ryan Lindley, but he didn't have the same experience. And I think Gabbert, if you look at throughout his career, whether it was in Jacksonville or San Francisco, 6 offensive coordinators, 4 head coaches. And, one thing that I noticed, big frame, strong guy, smart guy, but he throws a fastball every single time. He's got to put a little touch on the ball, and maybe that's just more getting comfortable.
Yeah, and I agree with all those points, and I thought it was a good move, the Cardinals signing him. I would just caution anybody thinking he's going to be the heir apparent for sure or that he's the answer. I agree with all that. He's been in some bad situations, but I also look at 2 teams let him go. And yeah, he wasn't on very good teams, but he didn't do a lot to make those teams better either. So we'll see. I think the jury is still out. It's going to be interesting offseason. It's a perfect time. Nobody wants to play a 5th preseason game or have an extra week of camp, but for the quarterback position, I think it's going to be a good thing for a Blaine Gabbert and even for the Texas A&M kid. I'm having a brain snap. Trevor Knight. Yeah, I think it's going to be good for him. He has a nice arm.
Yeah, but you made it very clear, though, just a few minutes ago that Arians is maintained that Drew Stanton is the backup quarterback. Now, we're going to see a lot of Drew Stanton, Gabbert, and then we'll throw in Knight. Because you are playing 5 preseason games. Now, obviously, your starters will probably play the most at a certain point, but for the most part, let me ask you this then, and remains to be seen, because now we start talking about, do they keep 3 quarterbacks on the active roster? I mean, Gabbert obviously is not practice squad eligible. Trevor Knight is. Zach Dysert wouldn't have been. He got claimed by the Dallas Cowboys. So how do you see this playing out when you start looking at, are they going to keep 5 or 6 receivers? How many DBs do they keep? How many defensive linemen?
Yeah.
It always comes down to a numbers game. And even if Gabbert's on the 53-man roster, I don't see him being active on game day. So how do you see it playing out when it's all said and done? How many quarterbacks on the 53?
Yeah, I mean, sitting here in June, I would say 3. Those 3 will be on the 53. Then they'll have to decide if it's worth keeping a 4th on the practice squad. Obviously, things could change, but that's how I see it shaking out. I think they've seen enough of Blaine Gabbert to be at least intrigued enough by his future that they'll keep him around, and he's not costing them very much, making the vet minimum for a guy with that experience. So, yeah, I don't see a major shakeup there, and the Drew Stanton thing is interesting to me because Arians still remains solidly in his corner, and you look at Stanton. He's in the last year of his contract. It would really hurt them more cap-wise.
Close to $4 million.
Yeah, and it's like $1.5 million of his salary's guaranteed.
Yeah, and he knows the offense. Again, I don't know if I want to see him start long-term. That means Palmer went down, but he's good in a pinch. Last year on a short week when Palmer suffered that concussion, granted they beat the Niners. He was like 11 for 28, a couple touchdown passes to Fitz. But, hey, that's your job as a backup quarterback. Don't turn the ball over. Try to go on the road and get a win. All right, the other thing that I thought stood out, now that he's healthy, Justin Bethel, I think he's got some leg room at that position, meaning he took every single rep with the starters. He made some plays. Bruce Arians told us he had, 5 or 6 picks in the offseason workout. So maybe there's some separation there between him and Brandon Williams, and Eli Buka came on as of late. You and I noticed that Rudy Ford, who the Cardinals drafted to play corner, was playing some safety. That was his natural position. So
Right.
I would say that Bethel right now is got some. He's got a leg up on both Brandon Williams and Buka at the cornerback position opposite of Patrick Peterson.
It sure seems like he separated himself a little bit more from Brandon Williams, with the asterisk there. As Arians noted, they can't play bump and run in the offseason. It's against NFL rules, and that is one of Brandon Williams' strengths, according to Arians. So we won't be able to see that until training camp. There also, but that cornerback spot is going to be a question throughout. It's a position they could address throughout the summer. We saw them do that last year, right up until
Mike Jenkins.
Mike Jenkins. Alan Ball. And then they trade
for Marcus Cooper.
Right before the start of the season. Trade with Kansas City, a guy they had their eye on for all through the summer as a guy who might get cut or might be available through trade.
Yeah. So I would think Palmer getting the rest, and I think it showed in the arm strength, and then Bethel just kind of separating himself. Now, it's you can tell from the skill position players more in off-season workouts because everyone's in shorts. You can't hit, so it's hard to gauge the defensive line and the offensive line for the most part. But I do think Bethel, just like Evan Bain, it's his job to lose going into training camp.
One of the other stories that intrigues me about the offseason is Andre Ellington. He re-signed here, making close to the minimum, only $80,000 of his salary guaranteed. So that tells you it's a make-or-break year for Andre Ellington. They move him to receiver, say he's going to get all the work there, which he did for the first few weeks. And then this week or the week before, he's back working with running backs full-time. And Arians said this week if he's going to make the team, it's as a running back. So it's 2 position changes this offseason, and Arians talking about, I asked him, what does Andre have to show? What does he have to do at running back that he hasn't been doing? It was pretty blunt from Arians. Run harder and don't go down so easy.
Yeah, listen, I remember when that injury occurred, and I think he felt the pressure. I think both parties were trying to do the right thing by giving him time off during the week, but they were shooting him up on Sunday. They were taping it up. He hasn't been the same player, and he was expected to be out 6 weeks now. Again, they were counting on him. To me, he goes down at first contact. He really didn't show the upside of being a kick returner. So I guess the question becomes, is he going to be a guy that's going to go on and be on the bubble if they're able to add a guy like Chris Johnson? Kerwin Williams, they're kind of intrigued by. Elijah Penny was 250 pounds last year. He's down about 237. They want him to play about 235. Again, they want him to become more shifty. I don't think
T.J. Logan's going to get
a chance at dress.
Yeah, I thought it was telling in Wednesday's practice. And the Cardinals people talked about this afterward. T.J. Logan took a short pass and just had this explosive play where he went. It's hard to tell when they're not in pads, but he went 50 yards for a touchdown. And talking to Andre Ellington that day, so I look at him, and that reminded me of me when I'm a rookie.
Yeah.
To me, that quote was telling that, Andre was like, okay, I need to get back to that level. And I don't know whether it was the foot problems or the knee problems, a combination of those, but he's just become, as a running back, he's become so tentative. And so, I think he got this, and I need to be durable, so I'm going to get down, and not get pummeled. I'm not going to take the big hit. As a result, he's gone down way too easy too often.
And Kerwin's the opposite. He's got a slight frame, so maybe you can't see him behind the offensive lineman, but we all know that Kansas City game a few years ago and followed with the Rams game, he runs between the tackles, and he's definitely improved on special teams. So there's a spot for Kerwin Williams on this roster.
And I don't rule out Chris Johnson coming back.
I'm with you.
I really don't, because you look at the depth. Kerwin Williams, he has improved as a special teamer. I wouldn't say he's a part of their core special teams yet. He struggles sometimes in blitz pickup. That Chris Johnson doesn't. He's a very good blocker. Carson Palmer trusts him. I could see them adding some depth there if they don't see what they want out of Andre Ellington, or maybe even if they do, but especially if any of those people falter, I could see Chris Johnson being back here.
Yeah, and I think he's still on the radar, and he said most recently to Sports Illustrated that he kind of knows his role. Now, initially, early in the offseason, he spoke to Alex Marvez and says, I don't want to be that guy that only gets 7 or 8 carries per game. Now, he hasn't been able to stay healthy the last couple of years. I want to say he's about 500 yards shy of 10,000 yards. But I think at this point in time, he'll understand his role. And let's be honest, when he was healthy, he was one of the top 5 running backs, at least, yards per carry, and he was doing a good job. But to me, that gives him a little bit of insurance, because if something happens to David Johnson, you can make the case with a lot of top running backs that are the bell cow, it would be running back by committee. At least you got a guy that's done it, and he knows the system. And again, it sounds like him and Arians have kept in contact. Yeah, that would not shock me if we see Chris Johnson in training camp.
I think Chris Johnson, if I'm Chris Johnson and I'm thinking of coming to the Cardinals, my question for Bruce Arians, the main one is, how are you going to use me? And I couldn't help but think back to the first few games of last season where he was healthy and pretty much just stood on the sideline. And while they went with David Johnson all the time. If I'm Chris Johnson, I'm going to ask, is this going to be it? Or are you how determined is your effort going to be to spell David Johnson and not rely just on David to tap out when he's tired, but to actually put me in a game and insist David get some rest or cut down on the reps?
Well, and I know Arians has maintained this, and he said this a few years ago, but the plan is to get David Johnson 30 touches. Now, we'll see. I think in the perfect scenario, if this team can get a lead, and not that they're ever going to be ground and pound, we know they're going to take their shots down the field, especially with Palmer's his arm strength. I mean, maybe we see in the fourth quarter that Chris Johnson becomes that back where you want to, wear the clock down a little bit. He's got the speed to get to that second layer. So, again, obviously that everything would change if David Johnson goes down. But I do think adding a guy, and I was kind of intrigued with D'Angelo Williams. Now he's 34 years old. I thought he did a really good job filling in for Le'Veon Bell when he was suspended last year.
He's sort of a David Johnson mold guy as far as style of running.
Exactly. And so
I think Chris Johnson's more of a stretch zone guy. That's his play that he likes.
So, and I asked somebody, recently, what do you think of D'Angelo Williams? And he didn't know if he would fit the role here. So we'll just have to wait and see. But those are two options. But I do think they're going to add a running back before training camp, if not the first week of camp.
You know what struck me also about the offense is Arians and the coaches have raved about the depth at receiver, and some of the young guys, including some undrafted guys, they like them a lot. And as I watch camp progress, some of those guys, and including John Brown, et cetera, would miss a Marquise Bundy, would miss a practice, a workout with a hamstring strain or some kind of soft tissue thing. And the old man in the group, Larry Fitzgerald, 33, he didn't miss a practice, at least not the ones where we were allowed to attend, and it seemed like to me he never skipped a rep.
No, and we know that Larry takes care of his body. He's been through this drill 1,000 times, but you're right. You would have thought we're probably going to see it during the regular season. Frosty Rutger, Carson Palmer, Larry Fitzgerald likely will get a veteran day off on Wednesdays.
And Arians said there were two reasons for that. He thought, one, Fitzgerald's knows what he can push through. He pushes through some things where maybe a younger receiver wouldn't. And two, he knows how to train to play football. It's not, as Arians said, I told these guys, don't go over the summer and train to run track. No, train to play football. He feels like in the past maybe some of those guys have come and not been ready for the wear and tear of running routes. And he said they talked long time with the receivers about this and were blunt. If you get a soft tissue injury at camp,
that's on you.
You could be cut.
Yeah, and these guys go out and hire a speed coach and running routes and everything else. I agree with you. I mean, I think they like 12 wide receivers on the roster right now, and Larry's even backed up what Bruce said that he thinks all 12 can play. They all got a little bit different size, speed. Got some guys that can go over the top, but. To me, Britton Golden had a really good offseason. He catches a lot of balls. He's been a good special teams player. Unfortunately, doesn't appear that he's going to be the kickoff guy if it goes to TJ Logan. But, you got a couple of guys, that are going to be practice squad eligible. So now the question becomes, do you keep 5 or 6? And where's Britton Golden in the picture here? Because Chad Williams, you can see the upside, decisive
Yeah, he's
speed.
on the team.
He's a
you
third-round
keep
pick.
a third round,
yeah,
but
exactly.
he looks.
Unless you're Buster Davis. Anyways, Buster Davis, when we found out that he tried to drive with the boot at Florida
they
State,
booted his car at Florida State.
He tried to drive away. Not a very smart guy. But anyways, he didn't last. So, when you get to that 5th and 6th receiver, you got to play on teams. But Chad Williams is in. Obviously,
it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for this team to cut a Britton Golden.
I know.
And they can. And I always look at receivers with a lot of caution because you and I have been doing this a long time, and we could name a bunch of receivers who are phenoms in the
Lance
spring.
Long, Seabiscuit, Stevie Williams, Jackson Shipley.
Yeah, we can name every year.
Every year.
And they're stars through the spring and through the summer, and then you get to preseason games or the regular season games, or they just get cut and you never hear from them again.
Well, I want to see when they put the pads on.
Right. That's what I mean.
Yeah, totally.
It separates. I mean, especially in this offense where a lot is demanded of receivers. I mean, you
have to learn all three positions,
and
they have so many different routes they run.
And handling pressure has been a big emphasis in this camp, and it's not just the pressure of expectations, it's actual defensive pressure, recognizing when blitz is coming, are you the hot receiver, recognizing what coverage they're in and what route adjustment you have to make.
And one of the things that Arians pointed out about Chad Williams, I mean, again, went to Grambling State, and if he went to a Power 5 conference, a lot of people thought he would have been drafted a little bit higher or more recognition, is he has to learn to come back to the football.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great that you can run routes, and I do think he has decisive speed. He's going to be on the roster, but that's one thing that he has to work on because when Kurt was here, Kurt Warner, I mean, he trusted you to throw to a spot. Carson's very similar to where once he releases that ball, you have to come back for it because at this level, those DBs will jump the route. So it's a work in progress, but it's going to be difficult for some of these undrafted free agents to make the roster. But we know over previous years, a lot of times the Cardinals, Jerron Brown, obviously Catman, from a different position, but they're going to have a few undrafted free agents make this roster.
And Jerron Brown made the roster that rookie year because he could play special teams.
Exactly, he was one of their.
He could play.
He was a gunner opposite of Justin Bethel.
He was good at kickoff coverage.
So I got to think on paper competition there, and again, you can't keep 12. Though we'll see if they keep 5 or 6 on the roster. But a couple of these guys are practice squad eligible. All right, what other positions do you see competition is in that secondary? Because they could keep 9, they could keep 10. We noticed that Tyvon Branch, who hasn't been able to stay healthy but is familiar with the system, took a pay cut to stay here. He's been running in their base defense.
Yeah, and we should mention Bethel took a pay cut to stay here.
Bethel he's betting on himself, and if he pans out, maybe he's going to make a lot of money. If
he will.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
we know he can play on teams. But Antoine Bethea, a guy that they brought in for leadership and veteran presence, I noticed when they went nickel, they had a lot of 3 safeties in there, very similar to last year with Jefferson,
Right, James Betcher likes to do that.
And Tyrann Mathieu. So on paper, they had Mathieu, Bethea, and Tyvon Branch. And we could see Branch and Bethea kind of rotate a little bit. But then you look at the corner spot, after Brandon Williams and Bethel, you still have Eli Buka, who is healthy. He made some plays, got his hands on some balls.
Big kid from Canada, but he hasn't played football in 2 years.
No, and they think he can excel on special teams.
Yeah, IR last year with a hamstring, missed his last year of college with an Achilles.
And there's 2 guys that we thought can play corner. Harlan Miller, it looks like he's more of a combo. I was told he doesn't have the foot speed to play corner every down. He was playing safety. And a guy that they drafted to play corner, Rudy Ford, we noticed him playing safety.
Buka's a fun story. I'm gonna write this soon, but he's from Quebec, and French is his first language.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he speaks very good English. I mean, English is he's fluent in English. I'm not saying that, but he said coming down to the States, it's been really hard understanding different accents. He goes, you got this guy from Florida, this guy from Alabama, this guy from Boston. He said he was at practice one day, and Kevin Ross, the DB coach, started saying Ewans. And he goes, I didn't know if it was a name of a guy. Use do this, use do that. And he goes, I went and asked somebody, what's he talking about? And he goes, he's talking about all of us as a group. He goes, oh. He's an interesting guy.
And they liked him. The fact that he basically was on IR because he was coming off an injury. As you mentioned, he hasn't played in a couple of years. But you can always tell that, even a guy like Olsen Pierre, who was inactive for every single game last year, they're counting on him. We'll get into the defensive line.
You go Google Eli Buka or YouTube Eli Buka and some of his highlight tape. And granted, it's highlight tape. Steve Time told me this when they signed him last year. Some of that stuff's incredible that he does, So I'm not making him out to be, the next Patrick Peterson. I think it's still, a challenge for him to make the team.
You know,
He
but
gives us some depth, though.
But he's a transition. This is the first time he's played. Has to understand, you know, he played at the University of Calgary, not big-time football. They had, you know, the football field's bigger. You're allowed to play. It's a bigger game, a different game. And then you've got a little bit of the language barrier. But he certainly looks the part. No question about it. The secondary is going to be interesting. My biggest question on defense is up front on the defensive line. They can talk all they want to about Calais Campbell and losing him, and we'll make up for it, et cetera. But I've got to see it before I believe it. I think it's a huge hole with this group.
Yeah, I mean, listen. I mean, we're going to see if Carlos Danzy's making tackles 5 yards past the line of scrimmage. He's making them at the line of scrimmage because Calais was getting double-teamed a lot last year.
Yeah, he got double-teamed a lot. I mean, you wonder that had to help Marcus Golden and Chandler Jones on the outside to get double-digit sacks. Will they be able to get as much pressure, as many sacks, without a Calais Campbell-type guy coming up the middle? And it puts a lot of pressure on Robert Kimdichie, you know, their first-round pick from a year ago. He is a disappointment last year. They were very happy with his progress this spring. They're trying to take some pressure off of him and say, you know, you don't have to be all this or all that. You don't have to replace Calais Campbell. But in reality, they need an elite player on that defensive line. They've got a lot of good players, but not that elite player.
Right, and between Kimdichie, Gunter, and Pierre, combined, those guys are making $3 million, and they're going to be the replacement for Calais. Now, I think you and I are in agreement. Now, one of the more underrated signings besides Phil Dawson was Josh Morrow. And it looks like Morrow's going to get a chance to start possibly in Calais' spot. You can have Corey Peters at nose tackle, and then it looks like Frosty will start at where he started a year ago. He's healthy. He had
Josh Morrow's really underrated. People forget he started 13 games last year.
And
he's a good player.
Yeah, I just think his snap count's going to go up.
Yeah, you're right.
And he makes impact plays, tackle for losses. We'll get into, between Marcus Golden and Chandler Jones, and then we'll see where Reddick is on some of their different packages.
There's not to interrupt, but they said, once Dayon Buchanan comes or in training camp, they'll start using Reddick outside in nickel situations. We didn't see that in training camp.
No,
it was like learn the inside position, learn both inside positions.
And we know he can rush the passer. Now it's a matter of him being versatile, because he's one of your playmakers. I mean, the Cardinals were very intrigued. The thing is, like a guy like Jarvis Jones, he's going to have to make the roster, but very similar to when they signed Lamar Woodley, he's never really going to fill up the stat sheet. They want him to disrupt the pocket, and that frees up guys like Chandler and Marcus Golden. We'll see what they decide to do on that.
And he's got to be able to play special teams.
Yeah, it's true.
No question about it. And their starting defensive line out here was Josh Morrow, Corey Peters, Frosty Rucker. The guys behind them that I think have to finally – I shouldn't say finally, but prove something. This organization has been very high on Rodney Gunter for 2 years, but I haven't seen him make a ton of plays. I think this is a key season for a guy. He's got some experience now, comes from a small college, and Ed Stinson, who has had trouble staying healthy, that they've been very high on. They need some of those guys.
Did you notice that Xavier Williams kind of changed his body type a little bit?
I know he cut his hair.
Yeah, he did. That's one thing.
Yeah, he's an intriguing guy. I've liked him from day one.
And they've loved that left punch that he has. I mean, you got to watch him in practice.
Now, there's a reason they kept, 9 defensive linemen last year?
Yeah.
Did not make one transaction on the defensive line.
At this point in time, they haven't. And then, again, a guy that you're going to see a lot of is Olsen Pierre.
Yeah.
I mean, there was talk last year. Now, they were trying to trade Calais, but I don't think anyone's willing to pick up that contract. I know his cap number was 15.3. I think he was making, 9.5. They were hoping to get a second-round pick. That didn't happen. But I was told that the Falcons called for Olsen Pierre in training camp, and they were not willing to part with him.
Wow.
And they've been planning this for 2 years on Calais.
Oh, yeah.
Gunter, Kimdichie, and then hopefully Olsen Pierre. But Xavier Williams, but the guy that doesn't get enough credit along with Morrow is Corey Peters.
Yeah, they really say he flew under the radar publicly and in the media last year, but they were really happy with the way he played. And he's going to be in the middle, especially on not obvious passing downs.
A guy we didn't mention, I hate to go back, is Aaron Dobson.
Yeah.
I mean, he's another veteran guy. Everyone's been impressed he's able to pick that up.
He's another guy, another receiver that missed some time toward the end of these camps. And it's grueling. It's not easy being a receiver in these camps in Bruce Arians' offense. There's a ton of reps and a ton of running. You mentioned earlier going on 2 fields and rookies getting 400 snaps. Well, some veterans are too. And it's demanding for a receiver. I would love to put my Fitbit on one of them and see how many steps.
I know.
See how many steps of Larry Fitzgerald or J.J. Nelson.
They have that GPS, right, where you can tell how much guys are running.
They know.
Yeah, we don't.
They know, but we don't, yeah.
All right, let's talk about the offensive line. Now, last year, Valdir goes down. They decided to move Humphreys over there. He missed the last 3 games with a concussion, maybe because they were out of it. They didn't push him to come back. Plus, it got some other guys to get a chance to play, John Wetzel and Evan Boehm. But let's be honest, Ken, they're reshuffling the deck again. Now that Humphreys is going to be your left tackle, and just a week ago, Goodwin said that they still have to kind of remind him that, we need the focus and we need more consistency out of you. Yeah. And he's always kind of a tongue-in-cheek quote was from Goody, is that he's always going to be knee-deep. Now, he's going to be the starting left tackle. Valdir's moved to the right side. Probably not probably wants to stay on the left side just because of money he's making, but he's going to have to adapt over there. Evan Boehm's now this new starting right guard. They didn't upgrade the center position. Shipley's coming off core muscle surgery, which is a sports hernia. He'll be ready for training camp. Upati's really the only fixture at left guard. I'm wondering how long it's going to take. I know they got a ton of reps, but Shipley missed the entire offseason. That was planned one team. What are your thoughts on the offensive line? Now, one thing on paper, I think they've created some depth with Cole Toner getting every rep at center. Wetzel can play across the line.
Well, that happened through all the injuries last year, where they went all the way down their depth chart to Ulrich John and I think Givens Price was active for a game and played. I've heard questions about the offensive line a lot from fans, and they're legitimate questions. I seem to be more confident in it than most people. I thought DJ Humphreys was adequate at left tackle last year. I think he's young enough. He's just going to get better. Upati, the big question to me is health. He's had some nagging stuff. If he's healthy in there, he's a solid guy. A.Q. Shipley played better than I thought he played last year.
Yep.
He's been in the system. He's a very smart guy. Missing this time's not going to be a big deal. I've been high on Evan Boehm since the first time I saw him they drafted him. And he's physically ready to play in the NFL, and he's bigger and stronger now. I mean, he's a tank.
Yeah, when you see him with his shirt off, he looks like a guard.
And Jared Valdir, I think, is a dedicated pro, and he'll make the transition. There may be some rough spots, but I think he's a better right tackle than they've had, like previous to DJ Humphreys. I think he's probably better than Bobby Massey, who they had before. So I like their starting offensive line as it sits right now. And injuries obviously could change that.
And I like the versatility.
We're going to see, looking ahead, not to borrow trouble for the Cardinals, but 2018 is the year I think they're going to have to be concerned, because contract-wise, Valdir and Upati, something's going to have to be done. So that means some young people stepping in. So
now their base salary is about $6.5, including the bonus money, but their cap number is
getting ahead of ourselves. But I think the offensive line could be better this year than a year from now.
Well, we haven't even talked about Dorian Johnson. I mean, I think he's going to be the future left guard. Will Holden, he looks the part. He's a 6'7". Ulrich John, and then they went out and got a guy that played 15 games last year for the Texans.
Yeah.
And you start looking at him, Tony Burstone. He can play guard and center. So I like the versatility they have on the line. And Cole Toner is a guy that got a chance to play center. He could play guard. So I like the depth there. It's just, what are you getting from the frontline players?
I like the drafting of Dorian Johnson. I like what I've seen of him. I think it's too much to expect him to come in and compete with Boehm. I know that's been written and said, but I think Evan Boehm's got a pretty solid hold on that right guard job, and we know Harold Goodwin, the line coach, offensive coordinator, does not like to play rookies right away.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in time, you definitely want to protect Palmer, and I think that they'll do a better job this year. And if they can get a healthy John Brown, that should be able to take the top off the defense a little bit, so that maybe they don't aren't forced to. Clearly David Johnson's going to be the bell cow, but it just seemed like last year teams took away that deep ball and they were forced to go on 12, 15 play drives, and that could be difficult over a period of time.
Now, General Manager Steve Keim told the flagship station, 98.7, that they have their eye on 6 to 8 players or positions where they could try and upgrade between now and training camp. What are a few of those that you think it would make sense to add somebody, even a street free agent right now?
I would think running back. We talked about Chris Johnson.
I agree.
Again, I think he's probably at the top. We'll see if there's any interest in D'Angelo Williams. I was told he may not fit the role that they're looking for. Tight end, I thought you brought that up in the last podcast. Now, obviously, a healthy Troy Nichols would go a long way. Moma got a ton of reps. Gary Barnage is out there. Now, he was kind of a late bloomer, and there's a reason why he's still out there. I'm wondering if his asking price is too high. The Cardinals aren't going to overspend. They gave Jermaine Gresham a ton of money, but I thought when you brought that up.
It's two things with veterans who are on the market right now. It's they're on the market maybe because of performance, maybe because they've asked too much money, and it's a two-way street right now. The team with these guys has a price in mind, probably the minimum, and the player's looking for not only the minimum, but at this point you want to pick the best situation. And why not wait until training camp and see where an injury is? Say, the Panthers lose a tight end or something, and then you go there. You don't want to sign too early, and you don't want to sign too late. That's why we've seen a Chris Johnson join this team
when David Johnson
during training camp,
hurt his hamstring.
John Abraham, et cetera. And the Cardinals have been very successful doing that.
I mean, they call it Steve Keim time, where they're going to sign one or two.
And it's been a big benefit. It's been a residual effect of boosting the pro scouting department in the Keim era. It's Michael Bidwell agreeing to spend money to add pro scouts, and they've done a much better job. I think they've got a much better read on what's available.
Yep.
Or a guy who might be on a team who might become available.
Well, I mean, before, and this is going back probably 5 or 6 years, is that once the season started, they were bringing players in on Tuesday. They had what they call a ready list.
Right.
They're bringing players in throughout the course of the year for a ready list where if somebody goes down, they don't have to worry about what kind of shape this guy's in and is he going to fit in. If I had to rank them, I would say running back, just because you got to have some insurance in case David Johnson goes down. I know that they would go by committee there. Tight end, and to me, I'm going to add another corner.
Yeah, I think they're always looking at corner, even if it's just, okay, let's see how Bethel, Williams, Buka, maybe Rudy Ford, if you're thinking about as a player who can play both safety. Let's see how they look during camp, and if we don't like what we see, then we'll make a move. I think a lot of that is what they've used OTAs for. It's a big reason they weren't real happy, I think, in Arians' first year with the right tackle situation. So they add a player, right before training camp. Eric Winston.
Yeah.
Right before. I can't remember names today. I'm like blocking out on all these names. You're like saving me all the time. But I must be ready for vacation or something.
Trust me, I had plenty of time off. All right, another guy that we talked about this in the past. A guy on the hot seat. And when I say this, if he's healthy and he's productive, he'll be here for long term. But Tyrann Mathieu looks like he has the explosion. Okay, you're starting to see him. They are blitzing him a ton in some of these off-season stuff. Now it's just more. Again, they don't have pads on. But to me, without the knee brace, and maybe it's more mental than physical, but you could see that they're counting on him to have a good year. I mean, they need him to make impact plays, especially if he's healthy.
And they drafted a guy, Budda Baker, who's possibly replace him. Yeah, a clone who can't catch. From what even he said on draft day, I dropped way too many interceptions. Tyrann really, with an exception of a time or two, doesn't really drop the football that much. But it's an interesting year for him. And my colleague Bob McManaman wrote a story about him, about how he sort of has changed. He hasn't shut down from being Tyrann. I mean, but he's not as available. I mean, and there are no goals on the whiteboard hanging in his locker. Not like there was like the last 2 years.
No.
And he
had some lofty goals.
And he was okay with everybody knowing him.
Oh yeah, I asked him. I said, where's the goals? And he said, and he had
8 interceptions. And
every player has a little dry erase board in their locker. And he actually, I wasn't trying to snoop. He says, no, there they are. Look at them.
He did, and we all did, and we all wrote it. That's not there this year.
No.
It's like
I think
he's
his
understated.
thing is, yes, and I just think he's trying to block out the noise. He knows there's detractors out there about he hasn't finished a full season. He's got to stay healthy because we know at this point next year, Kent, if he's on the roster in March, his salaries are guaranteed for the next 2 years.
None of this is anybody setting out to denigrate Tyrann Mathieu or hate on Tyrann Mathieu. I think everybody who knows the story has admired what he's done here, but facts are facts. He hasn't finished a season. They could cut ties with him at the end of next year. They did draft somebody in the second round who's a lot like him. All those, I mean, he's a smart guy. He knows that. It's not just people trying to bring him down, but maybe he uses that for even more fuel. Not that he's ever needed fuel to play hard.
But I've been impressed. He's gained about 10 pounds, and it's really muscle in his upper body. We know teams were targeting him last year. There was a point in this halfway through the season where he was almost a liability out there. But a healthy Tyrann Mathieu, to me, reminds me of the Honey Badger, that he was up for Defensive Player of the Year the last
and a lot of people,
it's
always been a question, can he hold up at his size? But, what's kept him out mostly are 2 freak knee injuries.
I know.
Turning the wrong way, getting bent the wrong way. The only durability injury, if you can say that, was the shoulder last year from tackling. That's the only one since he's been in the league. So, yeah, I mean, he's a great story. I think everybody wishes him well. I mean, he's such a unique player and so much fun to watch when he's at the top of his game.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he makes impact plays. And the game that reminds me of he makes that play 9 out of 10 times was the Buffalo game where he usually scoops that up and scores. And you can see the knee was affecting him there. And
it was kind of – then that play just exemplified his whole season.
Totally agree.
Like nothing – is there nothing that's going right?
Right, exactly.
Or not only for him, but for that whole team.
Yeah, exactly. And we look back and it was just one of those years, and it happens in the NFL.
And I think he knew it at the time. He's like, I always make that play.
Oh, he makes
it
in his sleep.
That ball up.
Yeah, I mean, that's a scoop and score.
Said, he goes, I can never remember not picking that ball up.
Yeah, and it was kind of like he was trying to pick it up to run, and the next thing you know, it goes out of bounds.
He
had
kind of had
scores it every time.
He kind of had gallows humor after that game about it, kind of shaking his head like, I hope the whole year isn't going to be like this.
But
and then it was.
The fact that he loves playing, because last year, remember, they put him in center field as a free safety, and he had a kind of guy lined up. But here, he's much better in the box. He can blitz off the edge. He's running backs in the flat. So, as long as he's healthy, he should be productive.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. 2 major knee surgeries, but not wearing the brace is a big deal to him. It gives him a lot more confidence. And he has looked quick and fast. We'll see in the preseason.
Yeah. All right. According to Arians, looks like Dayon Buchanan's going to start on PUP, so that could be the only guy. Otherwise,
that's another storyline. Probably underrated through the offseason. There were no major injuries. Other than Dayon had the ankle continued to bother him, and he had surgery, and that's not an easy surgery to come back from. I mean, I think we covered this in the last podcast.
Yeah, you mentioned Troy Nicholas.
Troy Nicholas said that's something that will continue maybe to bother him.
And that's why it was important for Hassan Reddick to get all those reps at inside linebacker. I mean, clearly you like to have him as your, situational guy.
Yeah, and they felt, speaking of inside linebacker, they felt Scooby Wright made some progress as an inside linebacker this offseason.
And he really is going to excel on special teams, but you can never have enough depth. Alani Fua's there. They're going to move him to outside. And Gabe Martin. So they created some depth. All right, Kent, you got some vacation time coming up.
Got some time off? Yeah, I usually.
Son's getting married?
Got one son getting married in late July, another one in mid-November. It's a big year in the Summers family. But, yeah, I usually take my vacation time when the coaches and players do. We know coaches who have red eyes out of here on Thursday. It's the only time of the year they really get off,
right.
And the NFL doesn't come to a standstill. But if there's a quiet time in the NFL, it'll be like mid-June to mid-July. And I'm ready for a quiet time.
I'm with you. And ever since Arians has been here, I mean, some other teams are still in OTAs and still got to have their mandatory minicamp next week. I love the schedule that he has, and it lets guys get away and kind of recharge their batteries and, get ready for training camp.
So I hope wherever you land in the next couple of weeks, you let me break the story.
You can leak. You can leak it to me.
I'll leak
No,
it to you. You'll know before it's announced.
Okay, good.
Okay, so that's just friend to friend.
Professional curse, yeah.
And I appreciate all your support and everything else. But look forward to doing the podcast in the future. But once again, we always appreciate you tuning in. You can find us on AZ Central, iTunes. You can leave us a comment, a question, and also on SoundCloud. Kent, have a safe summer and look forward to seeing you in training camp.
Same here, Mike. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Bird's Eye View podcast with Kent Summers and Mike Jarecki. If you're listening on iTunes, you could leave the guys a comment and rate the latest podcast.